It's just, I thought it was eye-opening to see how these evaluations work out. For everyone else, you will be judging based on these point ranges as different criteria. However, listen to the speeches, enjoy them. You then have 1 minute of silence to do your scores. You will add up your scores for the 3 contestants, and at the bottom, you will put your first, second, and third place winners. If you happen to have a tie, you have to break your own tie. So you must choose a first, second, and third place. Those ballots will be collected by our ballot counter, Jaylene. We also have another very important part of the competition, which is the timer. The speeches are 5 to 7 minutes. Going too short or too long will result in a disqualification. So it must be longer than 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and it must be shorter than 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Generally, short is not the issue, long is. So pay attention to the colored cards in the back and where. Oh.
Thank you much. And do we have an order?
Do we have one?
An order of the contestants?
Yes.
Okay.
So we chose cards 1 through 3 to determine the order of the contestants. The first one will be Lee Ritzman, the second, Dave Kaufman, the third, Larry Lennox. For our timer, would you please show us the cards and when you will tell us when you will show them.
So we have totally high-tech cards. Green will be at 5, yellow will be at 6, and red will be at 7.
Each speech has to be 75% or more original material. Your speech area is up here. You can have this rectangle of space with which to present your speech. You cannot go past it into the audience. There will be no evaluations for the speeches, and there will not be introductions. I will just introduce the speaker in the title. They will give their speech. We will have 1 minute of silence, and then the next speaker will go. After that, as the ballot counter is tallying up the scores, I will interview the contestants so we can learn more about them. And of course, at the end, we will hand off our temporary trophy to the winner and submit our paperwork for advancement to our area director. Are there any questions? With that, we are ready to welcome our first speaker. By random draw, Lee Ritzman, his speech, When the Facts Don't Agree. Lee Ritzman, When the Facts Don't Agree.
Be aware of what you think or you hear, because liars lie. Convincing liars use statistics. You know, it's a fact that 79.341% of statistics are made up on the spot. Last week we were watching the news, and the weather report came out. The weather announcer said that that 4 of the last 7 years have been below average snowpack. Now think about it. 4 of the last 7 years. Well, you can't divide 7 years evenly, but if it were 3.5 years should be below average, and 3.5 years should be above average. So 4 is the nearest whole number. What's the matter with 4 of the last 7 years being below average? I would have expected just as much that 4 of the last 7 years would have been above average. So what is normal? when it's weather, everybody thinks something else is normal, but normal is actually the arithmetical mean or the average of a whole bunch of abnormals. So any particular year is going to be abnormal, whether it's above or below. I heard a statistic the other day. The state of Minnesota is considering raising their speed limit. I just got back from a trip, and I drove through Idaho and Utah, where the speed limit on the freeway is 80 miles an hour. Boy, that's fun. Minnesota is thinking of raising it to 85. And the person telling this story said that speed causes 65% of accidents. Is that true? Well, if you know how they calculate that, you would come to a different conclusion. Every time there's a collision, the investigating officer fills out a report. There are about 30 different boxes on that report. He checks all the ones that apply. Speed is one of them. Speed is probably the most common, but it's not usually the cause of the accident. It's usually a contributing factor. Because if you had two cars that were not moving, they wouldn't get in an accident, right? If one of them is moving and hits the other one, it gets in an accident, and if it's moving, there is speed involved. Speed gets checked every time. My brother was an anesthesiologist. They paid the highest malpractice insurance of any medical specialty. Why? Because there's always an anesthesiologist in the operating room. There may be a heart surgeon. There may be a neurosurgeon. There may be an osteopathic surgeon. But there's always an anesthesiologist, and they always get sued. The attorneys take care of that. They do everybody in the room. They don't care who's behind the knife. Everybody in the room gets sued. So same thing with a car accident. And actually the rate of speed causing accidents is less than failure to pay attention to which lane you're driving in. Okay. Sometimes you'll read a statistic that says 25% fewer calories. Think about it. 25% fewer. Fewer than what? They never tell you. I saw an ad the other day on TV for a home water filter. And it had water from different states, and it said water from Colorado. You think water would be pristine from water? Contains allowable amounts of lead. Okay, who wants lead? Yeah. Well, when you know how they measure the allowable amount of lead, it's 15 parts per million. What's 15 parts per million? An Olympic-sized swimming pool is approximately 150,000 gallons. If you put 1/2 cup of an impurity in that 150,000 gallons, that is about 1 part per million. If you take parts per billion and parts per trillion, each one is 1,000th of that. Now, in these tests, they can measure lead up to parts per trillion. We recently had a situation on the Siletz River where they were measuring the constituents in biosolids, and they found none. There were no measurable amounts. So the conclusion wasn't that there aren't any. The conclusion was there was not a measurable amount. There could still be some in there. If there is some in there and they didn't measure it, then it's probably in the parts per trillion. So be careful when you question statistics. You may be part of the 74.38% of people who will have a 25% decrease in their quality of life.
One minute to complete our ballot.
1 minute.
The next speaker is Dave Kaufman, Inspirations. Dave Kaufman, Inspirations.
Fellow Toastmasters, I am a college graduate. Universitas Oregonensis, the University of Oregon. The school motto, Men's Agitat Molens, Minds Can Move Mountains, is one of many inspirational ideas that have motivated me over the years. But there was a time in my life when no one thought that I would ever get a chance to go to college. You see, my public education got off to a rough start in the very first grade. I contracted rheumatic fever and had to miss almost 3 months of school. When I was able to return to school in the spring of the year, I found that I was way behind the other kids in reading, arithmetic, everything. Nonetheless, at the end of the year, good old Mrs. White passed me on to the next grade. And that was my first experience with the institution of social promotion, where you're just, he's a good kid, we don't want to hold him back, we send him on to the next grade. I was never quite able to catch up with the other kids, so that became a pattern for the first 6 years of my public education. I was always getting passed on to the next grade just because good old Dave Kaufman was too nice a kid to hold back. In the 6th grade, I was placed in what was called the special needs class, which all the kids knew was for the retards and the dummies. Retards is a term I hate now, but at the time I didn't mind it because that's what I thought I was. That's who I thought I was. But all that would change in the 7th grade when a very special person came into my life, a 5'0" mollifier named Shirley Gagliardi. She was a 6th grade, she was an 8th grade homeroom teacher in the mornings, but in the afternoon, she was in charge of the special needs class. And after the first weeks of that special needs class, she kept me after class and said, "What are you doing in this class?" I said, "I'm a retard, dummy. Don't you even talk like that? You're as smart as any other kid in your class. You do not belong in this class." I'm not sure I really believed her. But she called my mother in to talk with her and the principal, and the very next week, I found myself in a regular 7th grade class. She informed my new teacher that I did need a little extra help with reading, which was given to me. And by the end of that year, I was almost caught up to grade level. For the first time in my life, I was getting C's that I actually earned. When I moved on to the 8th grade, as luck would have it, I had that same Mrs. Gagliardi as my homeroom teacher. She would start out every class with what she called a daily inspiration. She'd give us a little pearl of wisdom to guide us through that day and through the rest of our lives. Things like, always do the right thing, even when nobody's around to see you. Whether you believe you will succeed at something, or you believe you will fail at something, you're right. Be positive. Avoid developing bad habits like drinking beer. I didn't say that I followed all of her suggestions. I got through that 8th grade year at the time. I was finally above, when I entered high school, above grade level. I had developed the habits of reading. And I found that there would be other teachers along the way that would continue to give me inspirations to move on and to continue to succeed. By the time I graduated from high school, 4th in my class, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that I was going on to college. And that's how I came to the University of Oregon. I'm embarrassed to say that because I did a lot of those things that Mrs. Gagliardi had warned us about doing, it took me a little over 5 years to finally graduate. But when I finally had that diploma in my hand, I knew that more than anybody else was been the inspiration of Mrs. Gagliardi that got me to this point in my life. I wish she'd been there, but I could have thanked her personally. But I would not get that chance for another 25 years. at my 30th high school reunion. I looked out over the floor and I saw this little white-haired lady sitting next to the dance floor. And I walked up to her and says, Mrs. Gagliardi, you probably don't remember me, but little Davy Kaufman, of course I remember you. See, you never did learn how to comb your hair. Well, Mrs. Gagliardi, I just wanted you to know what an inspiration you were to me in grade school. And if it wasn't for your influence in my life, I would have never made it to college and made it to graduate from college. I just wanted to say thank you. She said, if you really like to sing, old lady, you could ask her to dance. I tried to beg off telling her that I wasn't a very good dancer, and she says, whether you dance or not, people will think you're a fool, so why not dance and enjoy yourself? Well, I did dance with her that day, and I did thoroughly enjoy myself. Since that time, Mrs. Gagliardi has passed away. But I feel it's my obligation now to pass on what help she gave me. And so I would encourage all of you in your lives, if there's ever been anybody in your life that's been an inspiration to you, you have an obligation to pay it forward. Try to be an inspiration to somebody else in their lives. Nothing can be more rewarding. I can assure you, you'll be glad you did. Thank you.
Complete your ballot.
I would.
1 minute.
Our third contestant is Larry. Sorry. Larry Leonard. Simple things. Larry Leonard. Simple things.
Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, when will the lunacy ever end? This technology revolution reminds me of one of those car alarms that honks on and on and on until it drives everybody crazy because there's no off button. I prefer simpler things. That's why I bought a used 20-year-old pickup truck that doesn't do anything at all except for drive. It starts when I turn the key, runs until I turn it off. It's a truck. It's not supposed to play the Facebook or do the tweeter. You don't need backup cameras to park. That's what bumpers are for. But it is supposed to play music. The aftermarket stereo only plays static. Electronics that don't work right. Big surprise. I didn't really mind that, but when my passengers asked for the static rather than my singing, I took the truck into the car audio store and I asked the young man to put in a basic radio. How will you use it? So I spoke real slow to let it sink in, turn it on, listen, turn it back on. He looked mystified. I attributed it to the pot shop next door. I said, what's the simplest doohickey you have? He found something on the discount table. He said, this one doesn't do much. I'll take it. He charged me 4 hours labor, 1 hour installation, 3 hours explanation. I wasn't far down the road when I realized that my new radio, the genius engineers had forgotten to put it on off button. My radio just does whatever it feels like to do. And worse, it figured out how to sync with my smartphone. So now, anytime I turn on my truck, the radio reaches into my pocket, turns on my phone, pulls up the worst song on my playlist. Don't ask me how I got a playlist. And I hear some guy droning on, I had my fun had. I tried to turn the phone off, but these things work in cahoots. You turn one off, the other one turns it right back on. I thought about taking it to the other thing it does is sometimes it pulls up my contact list and it dials up whoever. I never know who's going to be on the other end. Larry, is that you? Is everything all right? Hell no, it's not all right. How do you answer into a radio? I thought about taking it back to the shop like I had my phone, but that time the young saleswoman treated me like I was her demented grandfather. I showed her the problem. Every time I try and take a picture of a beautiful sunset over the ocean, I get a snapshot of my befuddled face. That's what she did. She laughed at me. She said, I don't believe it. So I showed her, look at this, 40 pictures of me, not one sunset. She said, you're in selfie mode. Selfie mode? I thought that was the mirror. I think we overtrain engineers in this country. I dread the day when one of those brilliant engineers rigs up one of these units with a stud of tires. Can you imagine electronic components driving all on their own, all over town, with no off?
Take a minute for your ballot.
One minute. Did Svetlana? She is sending.
I would please call the contestants to the front of the room. Well, so if you're participating, you don't get to vote, but,
Oh.
but you got to practice.
Yeah, I did.
So as the scores are being tallied at the different contests, then you will take a minute to interview the contestants. And we talk about many table topics. So I was thinking about what I would like to learn from our different contestants. And Dave, I was thinking, I don't really know about your hobbies or what your favorite pastimes are. What have you enjoyed doing? What do you do now? It's fun.
Well, I used to have hobbies that I enjoyed. But right now, my hobby basically is spending time trying to rehabilitate myself from the stroke I had a year ago. So learning how to read again, still dealing with my memory, it isn't all together there. Some of you have heard that speech before, and the reason you've heard that speech before and I didn't come up with a brand new speech is I can't remember new stuff. But the old stuff is still stuck with me. So still dealing with it. That's my hobby now, is just focusing myself to relearn how to read, keep working on my memory, to not be a menace on the highway. That's basically what I do now for fun and for enjoyment and for everything else. This is all my energy.
Larry? You probably didn't expect to be in a speech contest, I
That's
would think,
tremendous.
this year, as a recent member. So what else in your life has come to you unexpectedly?
Well, when I moved here to Newport, we actually settled first in Waldport 2.5 years ago. I wanted to meet some friends, and one of my hobbies is writing. And so I happened to notice in a newspaper ad that college said something about come and teach what you're passionate about. And so I'm passionate about writing. So I developed a novel writing class, and I thought, well, maybe 3 or 4 people would come in and we'd sit around the table and talk. 16 people signed up for my novel writing. And I found out 2 days before, and I realized I'm going to have to stand in front of a group of 16 people like a real teacher. And that was my first time, really. One of the few times, anyway, in my life that I've spoken in front of people. And recently, Evelyn Brookheiser, Paul's Brookheiser's wife, was in a class and asked me to speak at the Oregon State Learning Institute. There's about 50 people there, and it's kind of my policy to do things you're most afraid to do. And so I said yes, but I'm shaking today just thinking. Talking for 2 hours, that's 6 minutes. And so that came out of this whole teaching, writing, well, not the writing, but speaking. That's been a big surprise. Next.
And I had a question prepared for Kathleen, but guess what? It works great for you too, Lee.
Go ahead.
I'm a federal employee. I was just furloughed for 5 weeks. It was long enough to get used to it. I want to know, in your opinion, what's better, working or retirement?
That's an interesting question, because even in retirement, you should be working. But if it's something that you enjoy, it's not work, right? So I'm doing things that I enjoy doing. But when I was working, I enjoyed doing what I was doing. So in a way, it's like being employed without getting paid. So as a retired person, I participate a lot in community theater, mostly building sets, and some shows. I sing, well, Boy Scouts, and the Chamber of Commerce, and all these committees. People think when you're retired, you have lots of time. So, oh, you don't work, you can do this, you can do that. So, that's
I am curious, as a follow-up, do you find that you have less time once you're retired than you did when you were working?
It depends on what you consider. I mean, everybody has 24 hours a day. But probably the biggest challenge of being retired is when I get up in the morning, the first decision I have to make is, am I going to take a nap in the morning? In the afternoon, or both? I don't have a stroke.
That's it.
Do
Do we have to announce it?
It happens anyway. I think that
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a mild stroke, but I don't care what.
I think you should.
Yeah.
I would.
And
Just
if
They
they
can't always make it.
Yeah.
well, and if they can make it, they might be able to do the evaluation contest instead.
Then when you start.
Yes, that's what you said. The blank,
Oh.
that was the blank, and I just gave you the whole piece of paper. That was hers.
Thank you so much to all of our participants. So the runner-up who will advance in the contest or maybe be called.
yes, or
in case the first one can't make it.
Our runner-up is Larry Leonard. And our grand champion is Dave Hoffman. Thank you very much to all of our participants. Those were some hard numbers to come up with. I know that was very hard with speakers as good as we have. Are there any questions about our contest or what happens next? For our winner, we do have some paperwork to fill out that I will be giving to Bob. And I really didn't think about how to close this. So I'm feeling that.
Are you having an evaluation contest?
Isn't it part of the international?
Well, it is part of the international, and we can have a contest. I think only one person expressed interest in it. And she's not here today, but
Oh, I'm sorry. You were asking about our club. We haven't in the past. We were going to if there were multiple people who were interested.
Well, what you can do is just, if somebody is interested, you can just assign them, or they.
Which is what we did with Kathleen before.
I think, yeah, that's what we've done. I think that was the plan.
Yeah.
For this one. But it would be fun to do a contest. Regardless. You have one designated speaker. And, people go out of the room when they give the evaluation. Yeah,
I don't know if fun is the term.
Well, it's fun for the audience, yes,
Instead
to
of the
see
evaluation contest, though, I wish they were still doing
Humorous.
table topics, yeah.
Mm.
I think for practice, it would be a good exercise.
And I've seen multiple clubs, because I posted it on our district page, who actually have the two contests separate. They have the speech contest on one week, and then the next week they have the evaluation contest, so that you have time for both when you only have an hour.
If you have a full subject, that's
Lots of options are still.
Right. So I'm just thinking about for this year, for the amount of time that we have, I don't think we have that time.
No, especially with our pathways and the princesses,
Yes.
which have been announced. If anyone has seen, we have the pictures of our princesses up on our Facebook page, and we have their names. We do not have, well, we have the dates, but we don't have their full schedule out yet. But we do have our dates for our princesses. They contacted us, and they were very excited for coming to Toastmasters this year.
well, not that kind of thing. Yeah.
I quit having dates a long time ago.
We also had planned that at the end of this meeting, we that have officers training, we will hang out with Bob. I did ask, there's no one coming into the room right after us, so we can just stay here. And all are welcome. Or they might pack up and leave. For next week, we have a meeting themed Signs of Spring, which seems a little early optimistic, but that would be wonderful. Our Toastmaster is Lori Whitecap. We also have a business meeting. Our speaker for the day is Jay Lee. She will be evaluated by our newest member, Cindy Benson. The grammarian will be Dave. Table topics, Brian. Timer, Larry. And general evaluator will be Lee.